Hey, it's Christian. So I've been kind of walking through my journey with the meaning crisis and my perspective on this little corner of the internet. And I think going back to around 2016 and the experiences that were going on in my life, if you watched my previous videos, a big part of that, of my very personal kind of restructuring of my life, watching the intellectual dark web play out, had a pretty big impact on me. I kind of want to unpack the reasons why. There's the big names. I think that, it's spread out. People have opinions about it, but for me, it was like Joe Rogan, the Weinsteins, Sam Harris, Ben Shapiro, Tim Pool, and Dave Rubin. And not that I think today you look at these people individually, 6-7 years ago, their careers were in different places, their positions and different lines have been drawn in the sand now. But if we can go back, 7-8 years, they were all in different places and coming together to create this so-named dark web of the internet. So I was very much into that dark web. And I want to talk about what some of the powerful moments that stood out to me during that time that had profound impact on me. One of the first ones was I stumbled onto Dave Rubin's podcast on YouTube, and one of the earlier ones that I found was a conversation that he was having with Ben Shapiro. And yeah, now most people see both of them as right-wing, but at the time, Dave was he wasn't really secure with that. He's gay, and Ben is an Orthodox Jew, and watching them have a conversation, not a debate, respectfully maybe disagree over certain aspects, but actually care about the other person, at least how it appeared on the screen, that was very, very powerful. And I think watching several of his interviews made me kind of emotional, because as a person who was a part of like a conservative denomination in Christianity, and the kind of the gay question at the time, it's obviously still going on in churches, but at the time, being a pastor, that was a very contentious and delicate subject that gave me a lot of pause and gave me a lot of more questions than answers, really, I guess, and not really knowing what to do about it. And of course, some people might now say, well, it's easy, look at this scripture, it's easy, look at that scripture, liberal, conservative. And again, that's not really what I'm here. I'm just talking about what that feeling was like to see people of different beliefs and experiences sit down together. And that just didn't seem to be happening, at least where I was from. And it was just encouraging. And, you could have opinions about both those guys and where they're at now. And again, that's not why I'm here. Just in that moment in 2017 or whenever those earlier conversations on the Rubin Report were happening, it was meaningful to me. And that was part of that dark web. And then there's, other conversations where you have militant, quote unquote, militant atheists like Sam Harris, again, having conversations with somebody like Ben Shapiro or Jordan Peterson, and these people that were much more on the faith side of reason, and he's on the non-religious, non-faith side. And those things were, again, meaningful, and just that this was not a debate stage where it was a battle. To most a degree, it was, the IDW, I think, came was really centered around initially free speech. I think that was really the crux of that movement early on, when you had Jordan Peterson and then conservatives, but then you also had liberal atheists that had real concerns about free speech, like the Weinsteins, and specifically Brett, and the situation that he went through up in Evergreen. And to that point, you know, these weren't just talking points. These were 1, 2, 3 hour conversations, depending on Rogan or whoever's having it. And you're just taking this all in, and it's wild to watch this kind of take place in real time. So some of the other stories that were powerful to me was, again, you know, Sam Harris, who for all intents and purposes was an enemy of me as a person of faith, as a Christian, sitting down with people that maybe did believe in God, and not belittle them, but respect them because for whatever reason they came to seeing that it was important to have free speech. He was recognizing that as well. The Weinsteins were interesting, especially for me. Brett, I think it was on his first Joe Rogan podcast that he did during that time. Again, this is pre-COVID Brett, pre-COVID intellectual dark web, not post-COVID Harris, not post-COVID Weinstein, and kind of going back into that frame and time frame. And I was listening so carefully, and you know, I had listened about evolutionary biology and then even studied biology pretty seriously in my my nursing studies, and I'd even listened to a lot of the intelligent design arguments from guys in that world as well during kind of apologetic journeys. And so it wasn't like new territory or scary territory, but the interesting thing was to hear Brett talk on Joe Rogan, and he gave his illustration about religion. And whether he knows it or not, you know, and I don't know if he would want it to be, but he gave the illustration of religion being like the belief that raccoons could shoot their quills. And we know now that raccoons don't shoot their quills, but if you believed that, it probably kept you out of some harm. And he said religion's like that. Religion evolutionarily was true enough. You know, he wouldn't say it was ultimately or literally true. He would say it was true enough from an evolutionary perspective that it got humans to survive over time. It protected them in certain ways. And, you know, he obviously doesn't believe that it's true, but that it was true enough. But that was actually a very powerful argument for belief. And with my experiences and how I believe that my faith and my religion did protect me, did heal me, did give me wisdom, did give me a path to truth, that actually was a huge argument for its validity from my perspective. And I could go into how, you know, what does it mean to fear the porcupine, and that's the beginning of all wisdom? Well, what does it mean to fear the Lord being the beginning of all wisdom? And so that was kind of one of those moments that stuck out to me with intellectual dark web. And I believe it was a Joe Rogan podcast with Brett Weinstein that talked about that, you know. And then obviously the Jordan Peterson, Sam Harris conversations, actually having somewhat of a respectful conversation about metaphysical realities. And I think, you know, Sam's been on that journey with psychedelics too, but and Buddhism or whatnot, but it still was just, it didn't, those things were actually like shoring up my faith more than they were like causing it to question. And yeah, so 3-hour conversations about truth, not in a debate format. They were even fun. They became kind of like a roadmap for people on the edges of the field, as Nameless Fridays added my first video to a compilation of Jonathan Peugeot and Paul Vanderklay, and I hadn't, maybe I'd heard some Peugeot talk about that, but that was a gap for me. But yeah, like I feel like these were like a roadmap for people on the edges of the field to take up some of the grain and know how to use it or be nourished by it in a way. Because if you listen to my last video, I talk about my friendship with a person who had previously been Jehovah's Witness and my conversations with him about religion and faith as he had become an atheist and then is now a Christian years later. How these conversations in the IDW actually created like, oh, I want to have these kind of conversations even as an atheist with a religious person and it not be contentious. Because maybe a lot of people were looking for conversations that weren't contentious. I know I was. And because in the aughts, all I was seeing was debate, intense debate, and lines were clearly drawn, Christian, non-Christian, even denominations and, gay and straight and all these things. They were like, and now the lines have kind of blurred and readjusted and, but during this time, this is when the blurring was all happening and it was encouraging. It was hopeful to me. And I don't know, that change in format in the podcast and having these people that already had these kind of digital personas or digital platforms created a roadmap for more meaning to be made in my own life and through conversations and even just watching the conversations. Because I remember the IDW, Ruben hosted an IDW podcast and it had all those people in one room. And, from that point, there was, that was the romantic times. Like, things have gotten contentious between different people in those groups now. But at the time, it really brought meaning to conversation and to my beliefs. So, and then, of course, I want to add like a few honorable mentions. Douglas Murray, calling himself an atheist Christian was fascinating to me and even bolstered convictions inside of me about whether that's about worship or about the Christian story. And then now you have obviously guys like Tom Holland and what Dominion has done in the culture, and even in the testimony of Anya Hersey Ali's conversion. And I also want to mention Justin Brierley, because even during that time, I guess it was called Big Questions on the BBC. I would watch a lot of those episodes where you had people that were, pretty contentiously militant atheists sitting down with, whether that's like N.T. Wright or William Lane Craig or even Jordan Peterson, and sitting across this, the table looks like it's this big, and they're sitting there having these, in close proximity. I think all these things were playing a role in breaking down boundaries and opening up new pathways for conversation, meaning, and confidence. I felt like all of the aughts, like I had like little confidence in my faith. I still held on to it, but I did not have like confidence. And a lot of these things mentioned really helped me gain more confidence that now 7-8 years down the road, like I feel okay. I feel confident to get on here and tell that story at least. And so yeah, the intellectual dark web definitely played a role and continues to. You know, I follow each of those guys to some degree, you know, in the Twitter sphere or the YouTube's algos, but it's not quite the same now, as everyone is aware, and those are the hot conversations happening now. But then I'm thankful for it, and we'll always look back at that time with the intellectual dark web as being kind of a pretty cool moment.